If you asked any combat veteran who served in Vietnam to close his eyes and describe the war in one sound, he won't talk about the crack of an AK-47 or the boom of artillery. He will tell you about a rhythmic, thumping beat that you felt in your chest long before you heard it with your ears. Whop, 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 whop. It was the sound of the Bell UH-1 Iroquois, the Huey. It was the heartbeat of the war. It was the sound of salvation, bringing cold beer, mail from home, and a ride out of hell. And it was the sound of doom, carrying young men into places where death was waiting behind every tree line. Before Vietnam, armies marched. They moved at the speed of a boot in the mud. Vietnam changed warfare forever. It was the first true helicopter war. We didn't take hills and hold them. We used the helicopter to leapfrog over the jungle, strike the enemy deep in their sanctuary, and then disappear before they could mass their forces. We were the air cavalry. We traded terrain for speed. For those of us who flew them, the Huey was more than a machine. It was an extension of our own bodies. You didn't just fly a Huey. Oh, you wore it. You sat in the armored cockpit, sweating through your flight suit before the engine even turned over. The smell inside was a unique perfume of JP-4 jet fuel, hydraulic fluid, hot metal, and the nervous sweat of the grunts sitting in the back. Unlike fixed-wing pilots who flew high above the carnage at 500 miles an hour, we lived in the mud right alongside the infantry. We flew at treetop level, sometimes lower. We could see the faces of the enemy we were fighting. We could smell the burning cordite after a firefight. The bond between a flight crew was sacred. Up front, you had the aircraft commander, AC, and the pilot. Usually officers, often young lieutenants barely out of flight school. In the back, you had the crew chief and the door gunner, enlisted men, grizzled and tough, manning the M60 machine guns hanging off bungee cords in the open doorways. There was no rank in the air. When the tracers started flying, the captain up front listened to the specialist in the back because that specialist was the only thing keeping a Charlie with an RPG off our tail. We trusted each other with our lives, instantly and completely. The defining moment of a helicopter pilot's war was the insertion into a hot LZ, a landing zone under fire. It usually started at dawn. You'd load up a stick of 6 to 8 heavily laden infantrymen at base camp. Their faces were usually blank masks of apprehension. They sat on the floor, legs dangling out the open doors, rifles across their knees. We would fly in a formation, sometimes 10 or 20 ships together, looking like a swarm of angry dragonflies against the green canopy. The radio would crackle from the CNC, command and control, ship circling high above. All victory units, this is Victory 6. LZ is hot. I repeat, LZ is hot. We have estimates of an NVA company in the tree line. Your stomach drops. The pucker factor kicks in. You tighten your grip on the cyclic stick. You glance at your co-pilot. He nods. You pull your ballistic helmet visor down. The approach into a hot LZ is a controlled crash. You come in fast and high to avoid small arms fire, then you drop like a stone. You flare the aircraft violently at the last second, pulling the nose up to bleed off speed, turning the rotor blades into a massive air brake. The G-force pushes you into your seat. The rotor wash flattens the elephant grass below. Then, all hell breaks loose. The tree line around the LZ sparkles with green flashes. Enemy muzzle loaders. You hear the ting, ting, ting of rounds punching through the thin aluminum skin of the helicopter. It sounds like hail on a tin roof, but deadly. Taking fire at 3 o'clock. Get some, get some. Your crew chief screams over the intercom. The 2 door gunners open up with their M60s. The noise inside the cabin becomes deafening. The brass casings from their guns cascade onto the floor, rolling around your feet. The smell of gunpowder fills the cockpit. You are hovering 3 feet off the ground. You are a stationary target. It feels like an eternity. Get out. Go. 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 The crew chief yells at the grunts, physically kicking them out the door if they hesitate. The soldiers scramble out into the chaos, diving for cover. The moment the last boot is off the skid, you pull pitch. You yank the collective lever up, demanding maximum power from the turbine engine. The engine screams in protest. The helicopter shudders and leaps into the air, nose down, clawing for altitude and airspeed. trying to get out of the kill zone before an RPG turns you into a flaming wreckage. You look back over your shoulder and see the small figures of the infantry you just dropped off, already engaged in a firefight. You feel a sick sense of guilt leaving them there in the mud, while you fly back to safety and a hot shower. But you know you'll be back. You'll be back to bring them ammo. You'll be back to bring them water. And eventually, you'll be back to pick up the pieces. While the Slicks, the troop transport Hueys, were the workhorses of the war, the enemy quickly learned that they were vulnerable. A Huey full of troops was a big, fat, slow target during landing and takeoff. We needed protection. We needed firepower that could travel with us. At first, we just bolted guns onto anything that could fly. We took Hueys and turned them into hogs, or gunships, loading them down with rocket pods and miniguns that could fire 4,000 rounds a minute. They were heavy and slow, but they packed a punch. But the VC were masters of camouflage. You could fly over the jungle all day and see nothing but green trees, while an entire regiment was hiding beneath them. We needed a way to find them. And so, the Hunter-Killer team was born. The most dangerous game of cat and mouse ever invented. The Hunter was the UH-1 Cayuse. We called it the Loach, light observation helicopter. It was a tiny teardrop-shaped helicopter with a giant plexiglass bubble canopy. It was fast, agile, and incredibly tough. The pilots who flew Loaches were a different breed. They were the adrenaline junkies of the war. Many of them wore cav hats and blasted rock and roll music over their headsets while they flew. Their job was insane. They didn't fly over the jungle. They flew in it. They would buzz along at treetop level, sometimes 50 feet off the ground, looking for signs of the enemy. They looked for trampled grass, a wisp of smoke from a cooking fire, or fresh bunker complexes. But the most effective way a Loach found the enemy was by getting shot at. They were the bait. They would fly low and slow, daring the NVA to open fire. The moment the enemy took the bait and fired their AK-47s at the annoying little dragonfly, they revealed their position. The Loach pilot would immediately brake hard, drop a smoke grenade to mark the target, and shout over the radio, "Taking fire! Smoke is out!" Then the killer would arrive. Hovering high above, out of sight and earshot, was the UH-1 Cobra. The Cobra was the world's first dedicated attack helicopter. It didn't look like a Huey. It was sleek, narrow, and predatory, like a shark. It had a two-man crew sitting in tandem, the pilot in the back, the gunner in the front. The Cobra carried an arsenal that could level a small village. Under its stubby wings were pods of 2.75-inch folding fin aerial rockets, high explosive, white phosphorus, or flechette rounds filled with thousands of tiny steel darts. Under the nose was a turret with a minigun and a 40mm grenade launcher. When the Loach marked the target with smoke, the Cobra pilot would roll in. It was a terrifying display of power. The Cobra would dive from thousands of feet up, building speed. The pilot would line up the smoke with his rocket sights. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Pairs of rockets would streak out from the wings. A second later, the jungle floor would erupt in fire and shrapnel. Trees were splintered, bunkers were collapsed. The sound of the exploding rockets was a continuous rolling thunder. While the pilot fired the rockets, the gunner in the front seat worked the nose turret. He could swivel the minigun from side to side, hosing down the area with a stream of red tracers that looked like a solid laser beam of lead. Nothing survived a well-coordinated hunter-killer strike. The Loach would then circle back around, flying low over the devastated area to do a BDA, bomb damage assessment. They would count the bodies and look for any survivors. If anyone was still moving, they would call the Cobra back in for another pass. But it was a high-risk game. Loach pilots had the highest casualty rate of any aviators in the war. They were flying so low that if anything went wrong, a lucky bullet to the engine, a tail rotor failure, they didn't have the altitude to recover. They would crash into the jungle instantly. I knew a Loach pilot named Cowboy. He had survived being shot down 5 times. He used to joke that he was safer in the air than walking to the latrine. On his 6th crash, he didn't walk away. An RPG hit his tail boom while he was hovering over a bunker complex. The little bird spun wildly out of control and slammed into the trees. When the rescue bird got there, they found Cowboy dead, still strapped into his seat, his M60 machine gun empty across his lap. He had gone down fighting. The hunter-killer teams changed the dynamic of the jungle war. The enemy was no longer safe under the canopy. We had eyes that could find them everywhere, and teeth that could bite them seconds later. Shin loi ban vi su thiu hut vejo dayo fan truok, viek wok luong ki tu kwa ai, joy ki chua chuan shak. J Jenbu, lan nai toi se tap trung viet fan 3. Dustoff, the angels of mercy, dayen den hantu, voi jo dai, va kitie toi ja, kai ta sao vao tung rung, jong tam li. Ki thuat bai vasu am en quan hong chuyen bai ku thuong kong vu trang. Doi jai la fan 3, Fien band super extended. Fan 3, Dustoff, the golden hour. Gyo vang su mang. Boy can. Nim vu tan thuong. Kuita kong vu trang. Bai jem va noi am en mao me. Script. In the violent lexicon of the Vietnam War, there was one call sign that commanded more respect than any general's star. One word that could stop a firefight, silence a radio frequency, and bring tears to the eyes of the hardest Marine. That word was Dustoff. It was the universal call for medical evacuation. While the gunships were out there to take lives, the Dustoff pilots were there to save them, and they played by a different set of rules. The most insane rule was this: we flew unarmed. The Geneva Convention said that ambulances shouldn't carry heavy weapons, so while a Slick had M60 machine guns and a Cobra had rockets, a Dustoff Huey had nothing but a big red cross painted on the nose and the doors. We thought that red cross would be a shield. We thought it would tell the enemy, hey, we aren't fighting, we're just picking up the hurt. We were naive. To the Viet Cong and the NVA, that red cross didn't mean don't shoot. It meant high-value target. It meant a soft target. If they could shoot down a Dustoff bird, they killed the wounded. They killed the medic, and they destroyed the morale of the unit on the ground. So we flew into the teeth of the enemy defenses, defenseless, armed only with speed, skill, and a reckless disregard for our own safety. Our motto was born from the legendary Major Charles Kelly, who died flying a Dustoff mission. His final words to the ground commander who told him the LZ was too hot were, "When I have your wounded." That became our religion. We launch. We don't ask about the weather. We don't ask about the enemy count. If a kid is bleeding out in the mud, we go. Period. The mission always started with a radio crackle. The 9-line. A shaky voice on the other end. Usually an RTO, radio telephone operator, lying on his stomach in a rice paddy, reciting the coordinates. Dustoff, Dustoff. This is Lama 6. Request urgent extract. Grid. Yankee Zulu 49er2. 3 U.S. urgent surgical. LZ is hot, taking heavy automatic weapons fire. The bell would ring in our hooch. The adrenaline dump was instantaneous. It tasted like copper in your mouth. You sprint to the ship. The rotors are already turning because the crew chief has pre-flighted the bird. You strap in. The Dustoff Huey was different. The back wasn't full of ammo boxes. It was a flying emergency room. Stretchers stacked 3 high, bags of plasma hanging from the ceiling, bandages, morphine syrettes, and the smell. You could never scrub the smell out of a Dustoff ship. It was a mix of dried blood, betadine, antiseptic, vomit, and fear. It seeped into the metal. I remember a mission in the A Shao Valley during the monsoon season. It was night, pitch black. Rain was falling in sheets, hammering the windshield so hard the wipers were useless. We were flying on instruments, trusting the glowing green dials to keep us right side up, because outside there was no horizon. Just black clouds meeting black mountains. The LZ was a bomb crater on the side of a ridge. The grunts on the ground popped a strobe light. A tiny flashing star in the abyss. "I have the strobe," my co-pilot said. His voice was tight. We started our descent. This is the dead man's curve. You have to drop fast to avoid the tracers, but if you drop too fast in the dark, you settle with power and smash into the trees. As we broke through the clouds, the jungle floor lit up. Green tracers were crisscrossing the crater. The enemy was waiting for us. "Taking fire! Left side! Taking fire!" the crew chief screamed. Normally, a gunship would return fire. We couldn't. We just had to take it. I could hear the rounds hitting the ship. Thwack, thwack, ping. A bullet shattered the chin bubble by my feet, spraying plexiglass over my boots. I didn't flinch. You can't flinch. You have to hold the hover. We were hovering 5 feet above the mud. The rotor wash was kicking up a storm of debris. Then the wounded came. They didn't walk. They were dragged, or carried in ponchos. The medic in the back, we called him Doc, was the bravest man I knew. He jumped out of the helicopter into the mud, exposing himself to the fire to help load the patients. Easy, watch his leg, watch his leg. We loaded 4 of them. They were covered in mud and blood. One boy, he couldn't have been more than 19, was missing his lower jaw. Another had a sucking chest wound, his pink foam bubbling out with every breath. Load complete, go, 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 Doc yelled over the intercom. I pulled pitch. The engine screamed. We were heavy. Too heavy. The RPM warning horn blared. Beep, beep, beep. I nosed the aircraft over, trading altitude for airspeed, skimming the treetops. We took more fire on the way out. A round punched through the transmission deck, and the smell of burning oil filled the cockpit. But the blades kept turning. The flight back to the field hospital, the evac, is the longest flight of your life. It's the golden hour. If you get them to a surgeon within an hour, they have a 90% chance of living. Every second you waste is blood leaving their bodies. In the back, Doc was working miracles. In the dark, bouncing around a vibrating metal box, he was starting IVs, applying tourniquets, and literally holding men's insides together with his hands. I could hear him over the intercom, talking to them. Stay with me, buddy. Stay with me. You're going home. You hear me? You're going home. Sometimes they made it. Sometimes the breathing stopped before the skids touched the hospital pad. When we landed at the evac hospital, the orderlies ran out to unload them. We watched them disappear through the swinging doors of the triage tent. Then came the worst part, the cleanup. We flew back to the refueling point. We got out. The back of the helicopter looked like a slaughterhouse. The floor was slick with blood. It pooled in the rivets. We took a water hose and washed it out. Watching that red water wash out of the door and soak into the dirt, that was the moment that broke you. You realized that was American blood. That was the life of a kid from Ohio or Texas or Brooklyn. And you were washing it away like it was nothing, just to get ready to go back and do it again. Because the radio was already crackling. Another unit was in trouble, another kid was bleeding, and we were the only hope they had. There was a special kind of trauma for Dustoff pilots. We didn't kill the enemy. We didn't get the satisfaction of shooting back. We just absorbed the pain. We saw the results of the war in high definition. We saw what a mortar shell does to a human body. We saw the burns from napalm. And we had to play God. Sometimes, on a hot LZ with too many wounded and not enough space, you had to choose. You had to look at the pile of broken bodies and decide, take him, leave him. He's already gone. Those faces haunt you. The eyes of the ones you left behind because your engine couldn't lift the weight. But then there were the saves. I remember landing once to pick up a soldier who had stepped on a mine. He was in bad shape, double amputee. He was gray, entering shock. We got him to the hospital in 12 minutes flat. I flew that Huey so hard I thought the rotor mast would snap. 3 days later, the surgeon found me in the mess hall. He made it, the doctor said. He woke up this morning. That moment, that single moment made up for every bullet hole, every nightmare, every drop of blood I had to wash off the deck. We weren't heroes. The heroes were the grunts in the mud. We were just the taxi drivers. But for 20 minutes, between the jungle and the hospital, we were the guardians of their souls. And that red cross on the door? Eventually the paint peeled off. It got covered in soot and oil, but to us it never faded. It was the only clean thing in a dirty war. While the Hueys danced and the Cobras struck, there was another class of machine that owned the sky over Vietnam. They were the heavy lifters, the beasts of burden, the CH-47 Chinook. We called it the Hook, and the CH-54 Tarhe. We called it the Sky Crane. If a Huey sounded like a beating heart, a Chinook sounded like the end of the world. It had 2 massive rotors spinning in opposite directions. The sound wasn't a whop-whop. It was a bone-crushing thrum-thrum-thrum that shook the leaves off the trees and vibrated your teeth fillings. It was the size of a school bus and just as aerodynamic, but without the hook, the war would have stopped. They carried everything. They slung 105mm howitzers underneath their bellies and flew them to the top of razor-backed mountains to build fire support bases in the clouds.
Get that hook secure now! Watch your spacing!
They carried pallets of ammo, nets full of sea rations, and bladders of water. Flying a Chinook was like wrestling a dinosaur. It was heavy on the controls. It leaked hydraulic fluid constantly. We used to say, if it stops leaking, that means it's empty. So land immediately. The pilots who flew these beasts had nerves of steel. They had to perform the pinnacle landing. Imagine trying to park a bus on top of a telephone pole. They would hover the rear wheels of the Chinook onto a tiny mountain peak, while the front of the helicopter hung over a 1,000-foot drop, just to offload troops or artillery. One gust of wind, one mistake on the cyclic, and the whole bird would tumble down the mountain. But the most dangerous mission for the heavy lifters wasn't hauling beans and bullets. It was aircraft recovery. Vietnam was a graveyard for helicopters. Hueys and Cobras were shot down daily. But we didn't leave our machines behind. If a bird went down, we went to get it. We couldn't let the enemy capture our technology, our radios, or our crypto gear. This was the job of the recovery team. Picture this. A Cobra has been shot down in a hot valley. The crew has been rescued by a Dustoff, but the wreck is still there, lying on its side in the elephant grass. The NVA are still in the tree line, watching it, waiting. They know we want it back. It's a trap. The Chinook or Sky Crane rumbles in. It's huge. It's slow. It's the biggest target in the sky. You have to hover directly over the wreckage. You are a sitting duck. Beneath you, the riggers, crazy guys on the ground, are running out to the crashed helicopter, fighting through the mud, trying to hook up the sling cables to the rotor mast of the dead bird. You are hovering at 50 feet. The rotor wash is kicking up a hurricane of dust and debris. Then, the tracers start flying. The enemy opens up on the hovering giant. You can feel the rounds hitting the floor plates. Thump, thump, thump. You can't move. You have to hold the hover until the riggers are clear. Hooked up. Go, go, the loadmaster screams. You pull power. The engines groan as they take the weight of the dead helicopter. You lift it slowly out of the mud. Now you are flying a slow, heavy target, dragging a broken helicopter beneath you like a pendulum. You are flying at 60 knots, tempting every gunner on the ground to take a shot. I saw a Chinook take an RPG in the rear pylon during a recovery. The whole aft section disintegrated. The massive rear blades smashed into the front blades. The helicopter fell out of the sky like a stone. It was a tragedy. A crew of 5 killed trying to save a piece of metal. But we kept doing it. Because in Vietnam, you save what you can. You save the men first, then you save the machines. And sometimes, the heavy lifters were used for something even more terrifying. The Daisy Cutter, a 15,000-pound bomb. The BLU-82. It was the size of a Volkswagen Beetle. A Sky Crane would haul it in. The pilot would release it over the jungle to clear an LZ instantly. When that thing went off, the shockwave was visible for miles. It flattened the jungle into a perfect circle of dirt. It liquefied anything living within a mile. Watching a daisy cutter drop was a reminder of the sheer, overwhelming power we were unleashing on that small country. But even with all that power, even with the giant machines and the massive bombs, the jungle always seemed to grow back. The enemy always seemed to return. Every pilot had a date etched into his brain. The Deros date. Date of estimated return from overseas. You counted the days. You counted the missions. When you became a short timer, less than 30 days left, the fear changed. It wasn't the fear of combat anymore. It was the fear of bad luck. You became superstitious. You didn't want to fly. You didn't want to die on the last day. But finally, the day came. You turned in your flight gear. You handed your helmet to the new guy, the F&G, fucking new guy. And you saw the same terror in his eyes that you had a year ago. You boarded the Freedom Bird, usually a commercial airliner, a Pan Am or United jet chartered by the military. Stepping onto that plane was surreal. There was air conditioning. There were stewardesses with perfume and smiles. There was no mud. When the pilot announced feet wet, meaning we were over the ocean leaving Vietnam airspace, the whole plane cheered. Men cried. We were alive. We had survived the helicopter war. But the war didn't end when the wheels touched down in San Francisco or Seattle. We came home to a country that didn't understand, a country that was angry. There were no parades, no bands playing. We were told to take off our uniforms in the airport bathroom and put on civilian clothes so we wouldn't get spat on or called baby killers. I remember walking through the terminal, carrying my duffel bag, looking at the people rushing around. They were worrying about traffic, or the weather, or sports. I wanted to grab them and shake them. I wanted to scream, "Don't you know? Don't you know that 12 hours ago I was pulling dead kids out of a rice paddy?" But I didn't. I just walked. The silence was louder than the mortars. And then the quiet years began. We tried to be normal. We got jobs. We got married. We tried to forget the sound of the blades. But you can't turn it off. PTSD isn't just nightmares. It's the little things. It's driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour and feeling anxious because you're moving too slow to avoid sniper fire. It's sitting in a restaurant and needing to face the door, scanning the room for threats. It's the sound of a ceiling fan. Whop, whop, whop. You're lying in bed, safe in your home, 10,000 miles from the war. But you hear that fan and suddenly your heart is racing. You can smell the JP4 fuel. You can feel the vibration of the cyclic stick in your hand. You are back in the cockpit, dropping into a hot LZ in the A Shao Valley. We missed it. That's the dirty secret. We hated the war, but we missed the intensity. We missed the brotherhood. In the air, life was simple. You lived or you died. Your friends had your back. There was no politics, no bills to pay, no lies. Civilian life felt gray and flat compared to the technicolor chaos of Vietnam. It took decades for us to talk. Eventually, we went to the wall. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C. We walked down that black granite path, looking for names. I found my co-pilot. I found my crew chief. I found the guys I couldn't save. I touched their names. The stone was cold, but it felt like closing a circuit. We, the helicopter pilots of Vietnam, share a bond that time cannot break. We were the cowboys of the sky. We flew machines that weren't supposed to fly, into places we weren't supposed to be, to save men we didn't know. We left our youth in the jungle. We left our innocence in the clouds. But if you ask any of us, if we had to do it all over again, if we heard that call on the radio, Dustoff, Dustoff, taking fire, we would strap in. We would pull pitch, and we would fly, because that's what we do. This has been the story of the helicopter pilots of Vietnam. The men who flew the Huey, the Cobra, the Loach, and the Hook. They were the angels on our shoulders. Thank you for listening to Beneath the Metal. If this story moved you, please subscribe and share it to keep the legacy alive. Welcome home, brothers. Welcome home.